Bobby, we're live.
That we are.
So,
how you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, getting ready for the second kid here coming up pretty soon.
That's in like a couple weeks, right?
That's in a couple weeks, yeah.
How's that going?
Not quite as nervous as the first kid, but at the same time, like, I think we kind of took a long time to prep for the second kid, so now it's all hitting me in the last couple weeks that it's any minute now. So, emotionally ready, house, physically, not quite. But you, my friend, have a big wedding coming up. Are you ready for the wedding?
Yeah, I think so. It's my first one, so
Hopefully your last.
Yeah.
One and done.
Yeah, no, it's been great. We had a long engagement, so it's been kind of steady. It's been really nice, not stressful, and at the same time, I think we're reaching that anxious point. You know, it's just about a month out. Excited to make it happen and have a great time, and enjoy it.
Well, I'm excited for you guys, but I guess a question for you is, what's it been like planning the wedding, putting everything together, and kind of starting a new position around the same time?
That's a good question. I mean, I think for me, I like being busy, and so I just think it's been a lot of fun. You know, working with Socialive, working with you has been great. We've been kind of stretching ourselves by trying to create video content alongside, you know, doing our daily jobs, and we get to do fun stuff like this, going live for the first time, and doing it all while I'm trying to get married. That's cool. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps that it's fun and you can do things like going live as part of your job. But well, let's get into it. Let's get into some questions.
Well, what are we doing
about
today?
Sales and marketing? Well, today, you know, Bobby here has been in sales for a long time, especially SaaS and enterprise sales. I've been in marketing for a long time, so we figured we'd ask some unique questions about sales and marketing that are a little bit different than the typical success questions you'd be asked.
For sure. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, well, let's get into it. So I think for my first question, I want like your most unique like marketing story. What was like a really cool event or project or whatever that you got to work on? Yeah,
well, there's been a lot of unique ones, luckily. I would say, considering where we are today and where we are with video being everywhere and how easy it is for anyone to create video, the most unique one probably was about 8 years ago at Comic-Con. So Comic-Con's a big event. It used to just be kind of really comic book fans until the movie studios really took over the event. And so what happened is movie studios would go, like, for example, Spider-Man. They'd go have the cast of Spider-Man go talk to a crowd, and it just really amplified Comic-Con. But Comic-Con's in San Diego. People all over the world are Comic-Con or are Spider-Man fans, right? So at this time, I was working at Sony. The Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield was coming out. It was my first job out of college, so I wasn't exactly high up on the totem pole. So I had the fun task during Comic-Con of running tapes back to the editors. So
like physical tapes?
Like tapes. I know. A lot of people might not even know what those are. But yes, so back then, in order to have live coverage of Comic-Con, we would actually shoot it, get the tape, run it back to the hotel room that was a makeshift edit bay, get it to the editors. They would cut it together in 30 minutes or less, and then we would fiber it out to the world. A little bit different than what we're doing today.
Scrappy though.
And then after dropping off the tape, the next thing I had to do was sprint all the way across town to another hotel room to meet a different video crew to record a greeting with Channing Tatum to his fans at that time of Dear John, because he was releasing a new movie with Jonah Hill, 21 Jump Street, so he was telling his Dear John fans to watch 21 Jump Street. And since he was in San Diego, we had to take advantage of that timing too, but of course we had to work around his schedule. But now, he would just hold up his phone and tell all his Dear John fans to tune into 21 Jump Street, and cut out that entire process of me running around like a chicken with my head cut off and the camera crews everywhere, fibering tapes and everything. So I guess considering where we are today, that's the craziest marketing project I've worked on.
Well, it sounds fun.
Yeah.
I've never been to Comic-Con. Sounds like a pretty crazy event.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was different than what I expected, but at the end of the day, it was a good time. Like, it was work, but it was fun. I mean, it's unique. Like, how many people have had to run tapes across town and record greetings with celebrities? So, can't complain there. But, you know, I guess that leads me into a question for you, since we're talking about kind of movies and we're talking about Comic-Con here. So my question for you is, if you had to describe or match enterprise B2B sales to a movie, what movie would it be and why?
That's a good question, man. That's a good question. So there's a lot of sales movies out there. So I think like an easy response would be like Wolf of Wall Street, Glengarry Glen Ross, Boiler Room, but those are kind of cliche sales movies. So, you know, for me, I think what has a great kind of similarity to sales in general and certainly enterprise sales is an oddball choice. I'm going to go with Finding Nemo. And
wow, Finding Nemo.
Yes.
Do explain, please.
So if you think about it, you know, when Marlin, Nemo's father, and Dory set out to find Nemo, right? Like, they're just these tiny little fish set out to you know, find Nemo in this huge blue ocean. It's a pretty daunting task. And when you're in sales, especially like when you're starting off, you know, you're staring down a 6 or 7 figure quota. That's kind of what it feels like. It feels very daunting and just like, you know, where do you start, right? So I think that's kind of an interesting corollary. And then second, I think, you know, along the way throughout their journey, Dory and Marlin, and I guess even Nemo for that matter, they get a lot of help. And it's because, you know, they just continue on that journey, and there's a lot of people that want to help along the way. And that's kind of the same thing in sales, right? Like, sales in a lot of ways is an individual sport, but if you talk to most successful sales leaders and salespeople, they have a lot of help along the way, whether it's customers, you know, partners, mentors, leaders, etc. Right? It takes a team to really be successful, and same goes for the movie. And then last but not least, like, you know, Marlin and Dory face so many challenges throughout that movie. Like, they're getting chased by sharks, weird, crazy, like deep ocean underwater creatures with like little lights on their head, and you know, a lot of trials and tribulations. And there's a really specific message that Dory delivers that I think goes really well with sales. Do you happen to remember?
I don't. Please do tell us.
So it's Just Keep Swimming.
All right.
She even has a little tune. I'm not going to do the tune, but
are you sure you're pretty good singer?
No, it's all good.
We'll save that for another one.
She says, "Just keep swimming, just keep swimming," and she kind of reiterates that. And you know, there's so much evolution, so many good things that have you know, come about through sales strategy and methodology. At the end of the day, it's a lot like just keep swimming, right? Be active, be responsive, be positive. Look for opportunities, help others, add value, right? Just be consistent. And ultimately, you do that, you stick to that kind of simple principle, and you're going to get to where you want to go.
Nice. I like it. I was not expecting that. I got to tell you, I was not expecting that. I wasn't sure where you were going to go with that. And you brought it full circle. And actually, I think that's, you know, a really great perspective. And I think that it goes beyond sales, really, you know. I mean, just thinking in the grand scheme of things, there's always going to be times where you come across, you got to find your way. There's hurdles, you got to come, and, you know, optimism, and just keep swimming and knowing you're going to power through it. I think it's a strong message across the board.
There you go. Finding Nemo, sales movie.
All right, I'm going to go watch that again tonight with James. I got to introduce the little boy to Finding Nemo.
Yeah, it's a good day when you sneak in a Finding Nemo watch. So.
All right.
All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. So, marketing question. I think a good one for everyone to kind of recognize is what's like an exciting trend.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's an exciting trend that's been kind of emerging over the last, I would say, year, maybe 3 years the most, where you don't have to be perfect. Like, there used to be this thing in marketing, especially in the 90s, early 2000s, and it might come from kind of the the movie or the advertising like space, the Don Draper days, whatever it comes from, is like that everything has to be perfect, that you got to make sure every pixel is perfect, on point. And now what it's turning into, it's about being authentic. And it's, you know, people say authentic all the time, but what that really means is that you can be human, you can make mistakes, you can be transparent, and you can still be successful. And at the end of the day, what a lot of results are showing now, and what a lot of data is showing now, is that people want to feel like there's a human on the other end of the brand, and humans aren't perfect by nature. So constantly trying to be perfect in your marketing is counter to what people want, because they want to be connected to a human business that supports what they support, or just, you know, has some sort of flaws, but then at the bottom line, they relate to that business for whatever product they're selling or message or some connection to that business. But you don't have to worry about perfect. And so for marketers, that's a huge burden removed, and it allows you to do so much more output, better content, more contributors. You're seeing influencers becoming, like executives from companies becoming influencers now, which in a perfect world where everything has to be perfect probably doesn't happen. And there's still some industries that are behind where PR is really choking down how much they're allowed to say, and marketers are still on that, like every pixel has to be absolutely perfect, we can't say this, we can't say that. And now it's really like, no, let's tell everybody, let's be transparent, let's show who we really are. We have all these platforms to do it, let's be real, let's be authentic. And to me, that's an exciting trend, because we can do live videos like this. You know, are we perfect? No, of course not, but hopefully there's some connection, because we're human and we're showing that side. At the same time, we're facilitating either a need, solving a problem, selling a product that helps people, whatever it is. It's just so exciting to not have to be perfect and to be able to be real.
Awesome. Yeah. No, that's, I mean, I think that's a great trend across, you know, multiple disciplines and industries. And certainly, yeah, I think as a consumer myself, right, like getting to the core, you know, realness of brands and the people representing those brands is awesome. And it also kind of lends itself to being more consistent in your approach, which I think kind of goes hand in hand. So,
yeah.
Cool.
Well, let me ask you another sales question. It's a little bit of a change of topics here, but I'm genuinely curious myself. But when you're looking as a VP of sales, you're hiring different people, you're looking at all these different resumes, and you're really having these conversations, you know, what really kind of one characteristic are you looking for, or what one characteristic makes a salesperson like really phenomenal at what they do?
Yeah, so one characteristic, I mean, it's a good question, because certainly there's several things that you're looking for when you're looking for a great, not just seller, but person to bring on your team. And again, kind of, I go back to the basics. You know, very early on, my very first sales leader told me that the number one thing above all else that outranks any sort of attribute or talent is work ethic. Work ethic can kind of cure everything, right? Like even if you're deficient in some area, or maybe looking to be better in another area, you can solve that through work ethic. There's a certain level of accomplishment that's going to come from just pure grit, right? Mm-hmm. So figuring out, you know, that, and it's easier said than done in order to kind of surface that and figure that out when you're trying to bring somebody onto your team, but there's definitely ways. And you know, again, I think, you know, talent is really awesome, and finding people that you know, kind of have some natural abilities in certain areas is really cool. It's really exciting. You're you know, as a sales leader, I'm typically drawn to a lot of those people, but time and time again, you know, I've been doing this over a dozen years, and again, work ethic and grit kind of outranks talent any day of the week. So that's probably the number one I'd look for.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a trend in what you're talking about with Nemo and the Finding Nemo and perseverance and just keep swimming. You know, if you have a great work ethic, you're gonna keep swimming and you're gonna keep going. So I'm finding out how to tie these together now. I'm liking this Finding Nemo example more and more.
Cool. All right, man. Well, my final question in regards to marketing, you know, and you shared some great insight and examples already. Give me an example of a brand that's, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, just getting it right in 2019.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's like probably some easy ones you could take. Like Gary Vee does a great job of his personal brand, getting his message out there. Richard Branson does a great job of like positive messaging and connecting that to his brand. But, you know, I want to acknowledge Under Armour, because that might be a little bit of a weird take, because they were in a little bit of heat 2017, 2018. Their CEO said some stuff in support of Trump. Some of their athletes vocalized that they were against that support of Trump, and there was definitely some tension. And the main, you know, athlete that comes to mind is Steph Curry. And people were looking at that. Under Armour had spent a lot of money on sponsoring different universities and colleges, you know, and people weren't sure where they were going to go. And then they had another big hurdle where a young, I believe, 9-year-old girl wrote a letter to Steph Curry about not being able to wear his shoes, and that was a big thing that went viral, and it was like obviously not a great look for Under Armour. But, you know, in the spirit of being authentic and being transparent, what I just talked about, they came full circle. They took it head on. They were like, yo, our bad. Steph Curry took the front of that. He said, you know, I can't let this happen. I have a daughter. And they made it right, man. They made shoes for young girls. They brought the 9-year-old who wrote the letter to Steph Curry's game to debut his sneakers, because they wanted her to be a part of it. So to me, that's really admirable that you have some controversy. You hit it head on. You're transparent. You tell everyone you messed up, and you make it right. And, you know, what I'd like to see Under Armour do is take that to the next step. Like, what are they going to do with this more? You know, did they just make it right to make it right and show good face, or did they really change who they are and what they're about, you know? And so for me, it's like, seems like if you could keep this momentum going, since a lot of your apparel is sold to young athletes and not professional athletes, and you want these young impressionable athletes to have a good impression of you. I'd like to see where they keep it going, but for now, the way that they kind of pivoted and corrected and admitted where they were wrong was very admirable and very representative of how you can deal with controversy in 2019. And I'm excited to see if they can expand on this and really deepen their connection to younger audiences.
Yeah, no, that's you know, it's interesting. It happens a lot where, you know, a challenge kind of becomes an opportunity, and yeah, I wasn't totally familiar with the nuance of that story, but you know, it sounds like they handled it well, and curious to see how it goes as well.
Yeah. So we've been going on for a while now. I want to close out this inaugural LinkedIn Live with a closing story. I want to hear from you your craziest closing story in your sales career.
Craziest closing story. Well, you know, closing stories aren't what they used to be in 2019. You know, with you know, digital contracts and working remotely and working with customers across the globe in a very kind of digital or text-based world in a lot of ways, kind of eliminates some of those like crazy, I think, in-person closes that were just big in kind of the history of sales. That said, like, it's crazy how fast things have changed. When I first entered the selling world, and I guess in 2007, we weren't that way. Like, I think I got my first BlackBerry at that time, and we still had paper contracts, and we were doing in-person cold calls, in-person appointments, things like that. And I had a small territory out here in LA, and I think that's still etched in my mind. Right, it was like a smaller deal, very transactional business. I was selling phone and internet packages, door to door. Nice. But it's still just ingrained in my memory as like one of the most exciting times. And I remember this particular story. Oddly enough, I was selling to a bail bonds company in Glendale.
Nice.
And again, I had, and man, I was probably, 6 months removed from college. I had no idea really what I was doing. I was, walking around the streets of Glendale in a suit, looking to find anyone that could benefit from my services. And I stumbled on these really cool two business owners. They were partners that owned this bail bonds company, and I had a really good first meeting with them, and I'd set up a closing meeting for I think a couple of days later. And so I was going in there, very confident. ready to hammer this thing out, and I had a contract with me that I think at the time was like 14 pages. Yeah, so again, times have definitely changed, but to get 14 pages signed in person with two, relatively veteran, small business owners. I think they had owned that same bail bonds company for like 15 years. So, it was it was a daunting task in its own right.
Yeah.
Right. And sure enough, I sit down and they are not on the same page as I am. They were not ready to sign. In fact, they brought up a very weird objection that I did not see coming, which was they said they were moving. Or at least planning to move, and they couldn't move forward because I think the contract was like a 3-year agreement at the time, and I had a lot of ways I could have like reacted to that information, and what I had learned through that 6 months of kind of grinding and from some of my mentors around sales was like thinking on your feet, trying to be resilient, trying to be solution oriented, and so. Even though it was like very clear, like they made a pretty good case for the fact that they were moving. At the same time, I'm looking at this company. There's this huge bail bond sign out there. It said I think it was like Aladdin bail bonds or something like that. And they had this great corner lot that was just like perfect for that small business and had done them very well. And instead of just taking that answer at face value, right? Like I stood my ground, said, hey, like we covered a lot of ground. We figured out a lot of good things and how we can help you, and this moving thing kind of seems a little weird. Let's talk about it. And through I think probably over 90 minutes of back and forth, kind of coming to realize that like the chances of them moving are pretty low. They really like their location, and they did surface that it wasn't necessarily their call. It was like the building owner, and they were a long-term lease of the building. But we, again, kind of came to a common ground and made some concessions on each side, but ultimately decided the value of switching services at that time outweighed I think, again, after we talked it through, slim chance of them moving. And man, this was, again, after, I think I probably spent over 2 hours in there, and it was about 5:30 at night when we finally decided to ink the deal. And the guys did, I think, after kind of a relatively tense conversation, did what I think any small business owner would do, and they offered me a couple Coronas, and
nice.
And we celebrated right there in the office the signing of said contract. So, it was again relatively small deal, but in the grand scheme of things, that was one of my more fun, exciting closing moments.
Yeah,
quote unquote.
Cool. Well, it sounds like I have a pretty big impact on your career, and able to kind of take that moment of like, oh, hey, I can kind of talk to people and change their mind and understand their strategy and really listen and have a different approach. So cool. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I mean, it definitely stood with me for a long time. Because they were really bullish personalities, really like, they were kind of prototypical business owners, knew exactly what they wanted, and in some cases what they didn't want. But just through some listening and understanding, we finally got to that common ground, and yeah, made it happen. Cool. Well, appreciate the answers to the questions. You too, man. Love the Comic-Con story, by the way. Yeah. Tapes. Good old days. no more tapes, but you'd be surprised that movie theaters and the movie industry is still a little bit behind the times in using the modern tech, and they really gravitate towards those tapes, man. Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap this up. Let us know, guys, if how you liked it. It was our first time going live, and we plan to do a little bit more on like a weekly or monthly basis. But I enjoyed it. How about yourself? Yeah, it was fun, man. It was fun. It was I wasn't sure what to expect, but it kind of happened naturally, and going live was not nearly as daunting as it may seem. It was actually fairly comfortable. It's probably because I had you here. Thanks, man. Well, that's all we got, guys. See you next time. Wedding time. Yeah. For sure. What do you got going on the rest of the day? A lot. Pretty busy, huh? Say yes.